First up, I'd like to compliment you, Madam Chair. I think you've done a sterling job with this whole process, really. It's been highly collaborative, both on the part of engaging with councillors, but also local boards, the IMSB, and I think the messages that you've put out to the public as well. It's been great. There are a number of takeouts for me for this process. One of the really important things has been around choice and about having some scenarios. At least we had a 3.5% and a 2.5% scenario. It was a real battle to get that. That is the approach that we need going forward for the long-term plan. So we have even more openness, more transparency, so that people can work out numbers by themselves. And it's when people are faced with choice that they actually engage, because they're forced to make internal decisions. Just going out with one choice is not a choice. So I'm very heartened by that process. I think the other thing that was a real takeout for me that did come out of COVID was the ability to Skype with the community around the process. I was in a meeting, this was a Skype meeting, and people were able to put the councillors on the spot and ask us questions. And I think that's highly desirable. That kind of interaction is really good for us, because we need to be able to deliver. This has been a really tough place. Frankly, I don't know about the rest of you, but for me it's been life-changing, you know, going through COVID and so on as a councillor, and then working on this emergency budget. And in the main, I think we've done a great job about it. If I go back to that choice, though, because I do want to revisit it, and it goes to openness and transparency, but also explaining things in very simple ways that people can understand, like Councillor Newman was. So this is about the money that we're spending on parks and libraries and picking up rubbish and roads and renewals and all of those things. And we need to be able to translate our financials into those sorts of things that people actually understand. And I still think we've got a way to go there, and we can do it better in the long-term plan. I will say one thing though, and that is that I would have liked to trim something off this budget, and you know, I threw that straw suggestion yesterday, Madam Chair, around taking some money off RFA and taking some money off Panuku so we could pull things back a bit, and I know that didn't get traction. And that's regrettable. But I know. Well, I was here. I was Skyping, as you know.
You couldn't see what was happening.
But I couldn't see what was happening because, as I pointed out...
Awkward Councillor Watson, he had his jacket on his head.
As I pointed out, we do know that those stadiums on the part of RFA are not going to be having a great deal of use, and they could have some money pulled back. And we do know, against a distressed economy, that it ain't a good time for commercial transactions and some of the developments that Panuku could be party to. But anyway, I lost that. The other good thing that's coming out right now, whether we like it or not, is we're going to have a water strategy. I've been lobbying for that for, I think, since I first became a councillor 10 years ago. So that's very belated, but we need that because that is the only way that Auckland Council is going to exercise a measure of control over water care, because all council CCOs have to comply with council strategies, policies and plans. And the water conservation campaign and strategy needs to be a strategy for Auckland, and it is Auckland Council that should be delivering that. It is Auckland Council that should be setting these restrictions that people are otherwise or not going to be forced to comply with. And we haven't even discussed them, scarcely. They've just been given to us by Watercare. So we need that strategy. And if ever there was a time to actually implement it and to have some budget for it, and I am encouraged with the positive response for that, then that is now. Because if we are serious about saving emissions, one of the biggest levers we've got is water, because the embodied energy and the embodied carbon in water is phenomenal. We spend millions and millions and millions of dollars every year pumping sewage and water around Auckland and processing it. We should get the figures on that. It would be staggering. And as I pointed out, Auckland Council, I think, is if not the largest water user in Auckland, then very close to it. So we need to have the budget to actually implement those changes. They also mean that Auckland becomes more resilient, and that applies to both council and the population at large, so that if, heaven forbid, there is something else that hits us, and there are many things that can hit Auckland in terms of natural calamities, we're actually best placed to deal with it, which is why I've been advocating for a water strategy for such a long time. So we have an opportunity to actually get our act together here, and particularly post-COVID, Aucklanders are up for it. We know that people on water tanks like myself use 1/3 the consumption per household of other Aucklanders, 1/3. So Watercare knows that we can do it. What is disturbing for me, Madam Chair, and it was the reason why I asked some questions of Watercare, is we are repeating the 1993-94 water crisis, and we should have learnt. And I know that there may be some reluctance on the part of Watercare to actually save water, truly, because that reduces their revenue, even against a background where prudence and financial prudence would suggest we should be saving, because that saves on capital and the deferment of immense amounts of capital that may amount to billions. So I come back to the water strategy. The other thing that's critical that this whole process has brought to the fore is the importance of flexibility. And we've seen that, and you've driven that. We've seen that on the part of officers. That's been part of this process. I would hope that that flexibility continues, because if there is one thing that we must be doing right now, it's saving as many of our staff as we possibly can, putting off redundancies if it is at all possible, because this council will bounce back. I don't see the people from AT here, but they will be part of that bounce back, because Auckland, and we may forget it, on a benchmark basis as it goes to cities around the planet, is in a really, really, really good space. And we often forget that. I touch base with some of our sister cities. Some of them aren't doing very well at all. So we're in a good space. We need that flexibility. We're going to have some flexibility inherent in our debt not going up as much as it could. So I am very encouraged about that. And I would suggest that we do have the flexibility that's inherent in Team Auckland, which is part of that team of 5 million that's pulling us through this and has done remarkably well. And just on that note, I would say thank you to the officers, the staff of this council, for performing through COVID, because it was exemplary.
Thank you, Councillor. I must be Chair Taiperi.
Ka nui te mihi kia koe, Madam Chair, e te kora mātua, e tēnā koe. So first and foremost, not to obviously water down your role, but I want to acknowledge the Mayor and the foresight he's had in appointing you as Chair of the committee. And I say that because unlike the aged whakapapa of Kathy, I've only got 11 years, or 11 annual plans in this council, but I've seen things done in different ways, and I think around how it could have been done if it was other people. So again, to acknowledge you, Your Worship, and decisions you've made there, and for you, Councillor Simpson, and the way you have undertaken the role with the support of your Deputy Chair, who's missing. But again, just to acknowledge what's gone down, and I think, you know, again, for all the things that have happened over the number of years in terms of annual plans, this has certainly been different. And I think about the times of through the emergency committees, and if I remember rightly, the 8 to 9 hour session we had where it seemed to kick the ball off, and traversing through that to where we are today. And I'm also reminded when we approved the document to go out to consultation, what seemingly was unanimous, and My comment at the time was, I've seen it all before, until you get to the last day and it's a lolly scramble. And so, honestly, I'm very surprised and pleasantly surprised that I've heard none of that. Basically we all have to make compromises under the circumstances that we're faced. And so, again, for ourselves, we've got situations where we must strongly consider our Māori people. And one thing I want to say is that I've spent a number of years with annual plans, both trying to get in them and now trying to keep what's in there. And again, in this situation, Māori were given a predominant recognition of the impacts that could be on Māori outcomes relating to whatever goes down with the budgets. And again, it's a new world for me, because I'm usually fighting to keep everything in and stop us being cut first. So I just want to acknowledge everybody in the council who have supported that as a whole, rather than just a bare majority. Again, we've got a long way to go, and although there's talk about today being sort of getting to the end of it, I'm afraid it's only the beginning. And the thing is that, again, for our perspective, what's important to us for what goes on from today and finally on the 30th is where it is spent, how it is spent, and being able to track the money to make sure that it has been as effective as we said we're putting it out there today for it to be. So again, we've done some stuff on that over the years, looking at tracking expenditure, and hasn't always been great. So that'll be something that we'll be wanting to watch. But as soon as we do this year will be over, and we'll be needing to think about the next one. And as I keep talking to Renata and the others of our board, what's most significant for us will be the LTP. That will be the thing that sets the next number of years and the pathway for where we are now and where we can move forward on. So again, just want to say from my perspective that as much as we would like to do as less as possible, I'm a realist. I realise that our people need the services, and it's a bit like the water issue. When I was lucky enough to join His Worship, if I could say that, how lucky I am, to go to Hamilton City Council and Waikato Regional Council. But again, my concern at the time was, come December, January, would it be the taps of Māori that are turned off first, and would they be screaming at me? What did I do about trying to support the way forward with this council? The same breath, it's all about being meaningful engagement with Māori to make sure that we're all going together and not just being pushed and shoved in a way. So again, from my point of view, I will support the budget and the recommendations that are put up here on the basis of we need to get together through this year. And again, I'm pleasantly surprised about the unanimity, everyone being together, and go forward from there. So again, tate. So again, just want to acknowledge you and thank you very much. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I was listening very carefully when Councillor Young was saying that if he had the time, he could had to actually explain what was going on. He could bring people around like his wife, and if he listened to all the details. When I started off with this, I told my wife that we're anticipating a rates increase, and she said, "Well, why on earth would you do that at this time?" I asked her again last night. Well, I didn't have to ask her because she got running up and told me. She says, "Oh, well, you better just pitch in with 3.5%. That sounds reasonable." So there's a little bit of a lesson in that, and the lesson for me is I'm going to make up my own mind in weighing everything up, and rest with that. If you can't please yourself, who can you please? So I just wanted to start off by acknowledging what everyone else has done, and the very many fine speeches that have been made today by any number of people, and the due acknowledgement to you, Desley, for the superb job you've done as chair of this committee, quite remarkable, and the leadership of the mayor as always too. I guess in coming to my position on this budget, and I thank you for the opportunity for people to really explain their position, because I think that's important. This is a culmination of a lot of work, and people should be allowed to really spell out in some detail why they're taking the position they are, and that's what I hopefully can do in a reasonable length of time. So really coming to my position, I've really tried to balance both within the Auckland Council and without. So, I've been very conscious of what's happening outside of our discussions in here, and that's been important to me. This has been going on several months as people have remarked, and certainly when it started off in around about April or May, there was a number of programs on TV with Q&A where the rates of councils were very much the topic of the day, and we had the Finance Minister, we had the Prime Minister on. They basically, on each occasion they were on, they said three things. And, the first one was it was up entirely to councils to make up their own mind, so there was certainly no pressure from governments. They stated the obvious, that people were struggling and that councils really had to be cognizant of that. But they also said at the same time that, there was the element of economic recovery and the need to keep projects going. So that was basically the recurring messages. Certainly as far as keeping projects going, no one can say anything about Auckland Council in this budget. $2.5 billion capital program, our average is usually $1.6 billion. So there's no slowing down there. If you add that to the government capital investment around Auckland, it's significant. And that's north, south, west, and east. I'm not sure about, east too. When I drive up north, you see this massive infrastructure program along the northern motorway improvements, which are just phenomenal with what's going on there. You go a little bit further up to Puhoi to Warkworth, and massive big bridges and extensions going on there. So whatever people might say, this council is definitely walking the talk as far as infrastructure goes, along with the government. That's undeniable. One of the other things that came out of these Q&A sessions with the Minister and the Prime Minister was this demand for a 0% rate increase, basically a rate freeze, and we're aware of it now because it's still coming through. To be honest, that's where I started off. I thought, well, why wouldn't you? You're talking about making comparisons to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Why wouldn't you start with a rate freeze? Both for tangible financial benefits, but also the intangible ones of signalling to people that, we really understand. So it's not always about money. It's gestures. It's hard to put a value on gestures, but just the notion that, we understand, we're behind you, and we're responding. However, as this process unveiled, it is very clear that was untenable. It's an untenable position. I'm sorry to anyone that's listening in. A 0% rate increase just wasn't doable in these circumstances. And to be fair, I think there was that kind of realisation that came through in the consultation that we went out on. There was I thought a degree of maturity in the responses from Auckland, but it did have a limit. It did have a limit, and this is where I perhaps disagree a little bit with some of my colleagues around here. And it goes to Auckland as a whole, but as became clear from Councillor Sayers, there is a geographic component to that. So when I look at my own ward, for instance, in the consultation feedback itself, it's a very clear message. And this is echoed in other parts of Auckland, not just north, it's south and west amongst certain socioeconomic groups too. So for the 3.5, both Hibiscus and Bays and Upper Harbour, you had 23%. For 2.5% or less, you had 69 and 70%. So that's a pretty emphatic message. And I know people made the quite justifiable comment about the impact of pro formas in that, but if you go to the Colmar-Brunton poll, which is statistically accurate as plus or minus 1.6 in terms of accuracy, it's an equally emphatic message that is returned, particularly to certain parts of Auckland like mine, but arguably across Auckland as a whole. So I have, I've taken that on board. We pay a lot of money for that polling. As far as the Colmar-Brunton poll goes, I read through the process and the explanations that went to people, and a number of the consequences were spelt out reasonably clearly. So it was a reasonably informed poll. I know there's been reference to, to the unexpected water care bill, but in that preamble, people were getting a pretty clear idea of what they were or weren't voting for. So I have taken that into account, and it has certainly been, reflected in, in the ward that I represent as well. So I added to that some specifics too that I should probably make people aware of that have influenced my view on things. One relatively small in terms of the impact of the differential strategy, which essentially raises the residential rate about 1%. That's not a big one, but it is something else. I guess the thing that kind of really did clinch it for me though was when I looked at the the effects of the regional fuel tax in this kind of cumulative sense, and I voted for the fuel tax, so please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I oppose a fuel tax, but what hasn't become so clear in the fuel tax is the effect across different groups in Auckland, and I certainly, that became very clear to me when I looked at some of the research the IMSB had actually commissioned, and good due credit to them, they were certainly doing it from a perspective of the impact on the lower socio-economic groups, and particularly Maori and Polynesian in South Auckland, and that became very clear that was a group that was disproportionately affected by the regional fuel tax, and it didn't end there. It went to certain geographic areas too, local board areas, and again we had ones that you would expect out in Rodney, out in Hibiscus Coast, but also Manariwa, Papakura and some other parts where there is a disproportionate. So when they look at the impact on some of these areas, they are paying disproportionately more than others, and those areas were clearly identified. We get in 150, well we did in our first year about 156 million in regional fuel tax monies, and there is we have been equating money to rate increases, that comes up to nearly 9% rate increase. If we balance that out with the areas then that are paying a lot less, and the inner city areas, and match that out to the ones that are paying more, that starts to become significant. So I guess, Madam Chair, what I have done is looked at that cumulatively to see what the effect is, I think, on not just my ward area but Auckland as a whole, and that's really drawn me to say, well, I've moved a lot, I think. I didn't start with some people. I haven't gone to the full 3.5. I've gone to 2.5, and that's not to question or disrespect the very valid points that have been made by any of the people around here. But I've gone as far as I can go, in all honesty, if I take in mind what my community is saying to me, and also what other big parts of Auckland too, not just that. So I guess finally, Madam Chair, then, and I think it's been a point that other people have made, is really, as much as this has been very hard and a very arduous process, I guess it's pretty much small change when we look at people who are on the receiving end here, and that's the people who are losing their jobs, both within this council and without. They are the people who are really looking down the barrel of hardness and difficulty and uncertainty. And I do remember as a history teacher one time looking at the 1930s depression and what seemed then the remarkable disconnect between the people who were rioting or starving or out of work or on work gangs and the rest of the country that was carrying on quite the thing, quite oblivious to it. So I'm sure that, well, I'm very hopeful that doesn't happen in Auckland, that we are very aware of people who are doing it tough and whatever way we can do to help. And, I guess that's what people were going for 3.5, saying they're going to do everything they can to do that. So thank you, Madam Chair. I've made my explanation. In some ways, the fact that we're pivoting around 1% shows the remarkable degree of agreement there actually has been in this council. For my part, I'm erring on the side that's the percent down rather than percent above. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to echo the comments made by fellow councillors to acknowledge your leadership. I think it was a really good move on the part of the Mayor to appoint you as the Chair of Finance and Performance, because no one else could have brought everyone together like you did. And real leadership is about bringing everyone on board with you, and that's what you did. And I don't know if any of the other councillors know this, but in our area, I get referred to as the Samoan Desley. So keep going, Desley, because you're making us look good. But yeah, also want to acknowledge the personal toll that this has had on you and the personal attacks on you, given, you know, the political philosophy around rates and the position that you are in and how you are just looking at what is the best for Auckland. So I really appreciate that about you. I acknowledge Kevin and your finance team and the hours and hours of education that you guys have done with us to understand this budget and to understand debt and asset recycling and things like that, so that we're able to make a good decision, a well-informed decision on behalf of our constituencies. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge Andrew Duncan, because he was the one that was on the webinars that I was on. And it was so good to have him there and his expertise and knowledge to answer those technical questions. Kenneth Ailupatea and his team in terms of the consultation, making sure we got out to as many people we could get to, because not a lot of people care about council consultations, but the amount of people that responded this time just showed that people do see this as really important. I also want to acknowledge Sandra and Sonia for keeping the wheels turning and keeping us connected throughout the lockdown with all our meetings, especially the annual plan meetings. And acknowledge the CCOs and the cuts that they have had to make. I do see that when they come here, and you can see the strain on the CEOs' faces because they're concerned about their staff and the projects that they're trying to achieve on our behalf for Auckland. So I acknowledge their work there. My local board, Maungakiki Tamaki local board, their work in terms of the emergency budget, what they're going to have to give up, what we're giving up, but knowing that it's deferment. So I hope in the long-term plan we will pick up some of the projects that people, you know, want to see happen, that we need to see happen. I'm speaking in specifics about the Tamaki regeneration. That's the first redevelopment regeneration project of its kind for the country, and I don't want us to lose that focus. Regarding growth and infrastructure in Tamaki. It'd be good to see neighbourhoods get more of a focus in the LTP because through the Panuku deferments, we haven't been able to keep up with a lot of our town centre upgrades. So I want to see that happen through the LTP. Glad to see the LDI kit, because that is how our communities are going to be supported, is through the local boards and what they fund through those grants and contracts. America's Cup, very happy to see that there has been a cut there because of the public sentiment, but also because America's Cup doesn't appeal to everybody. You know, it's good for people to see that we're not only cutting in other areas, but we are cutting there. What else did I want to say? Road safety, good to see the money go back into there, because that is about lives, and that was also the reason why innovating streets was going to be important and should still be important. Thank you, Auckland Transport, because that is about making the roads safer for our communities. Acknowledge the 1,500 odd people that submitted from my ward, 3.5, 2.5, 0. You know, 3.5, 2.5 comes to about $20 a year, and the difference in between that is just massive. So I know it's not going to be a popular decision. People will be mad at us. I'm still thinking about why I have my face on my car when we make this vote, and I understand why none of you have your face on your car with votes like this, except for Shane. Oh, you and you, Kathy, because that is where people are going to aim their bullets. And even the stuff that's coming through is so nasty. And, you know, I didn't do this role to screw over ratepayers. You know, I did it to make a difference for my community. And 3.5, supporting 3.5 is going to make that difference because, you know, the alternatives are just devastating, really. People rely on council facilities and services in their everyday lives. And to do anything other than support 3.5 is going to be, yeah, it's just going to have a massive effect in our lowest income areas and for our most vulnerable communities. And I think of this one lady who emailed me saying she saw my photo with the pali. And she said, oh, you're just sitting pretty there, you know, with your pay rise. While I appreciate the reference to being pretty, I'm not getting a pay rise. You know, this isn't about money. Yeah, we're taking pay cuts, and it's not about us. It's about our communities, about Auckland. So I hope people will understand why we make this decision in the future, even though it's not very popular. I do want to speak about the most vulnerable and the COVID situation. Like Councillor Newman said, I did feel very privileged to be in a job where I was still getting paid and still able to work from home on Skype while I saw other people suffering. And, you know, before the food distribution centre was set up, before our communities were mobilised with food parcels, I was getting people contact me for food. And that's not it's an embarrassing thing for people to do. And so, you know, I just thought, well, I am in a privileged position. I can do something about it in my own little world. But then I was so grateful. I emailed Stephen Town in the Mayor's office saying, can we do something about food? So it was really good to see the council get involved in that space and also get involved with the homelessness. And I honestly do believe that blessings come back to you. And even though, you know, we did a lot out there to help our most vulnerable, for me, I got the blessing returned because I got a boyfriend out of lockdown. So, you know, and that's 15 years. But anyway, I digress. So I want to really acknowledge the role of our mayor and the leadership that you've shown. And the only time I hear your voice shake is when you talk about the most vulnerable and the homeless, the food parcels that we're able to do. So I really want to acknowledge you there. And I don't think it would have happened if we had a mayor of a different, you know, different kind of value system. Is that a nice way to say? Yeah. And also your leadership with the water crisis, because, you know, I think when things are tough, that's where you get a real test of who you are and what is important. So acknowledge your leadership there. It was worth me taking lots of selfies with you during the campaign. But yeah, no, I also want to acknowledge in the water crisis, Waikato Tainui and the Waikato River, because that is where we've been getting our sustenance from in terms of water, was the Waikato River. So I do want to acknowledge the river there, the Awa. And the rest of the councillors, this could have easily been really ugly with each of us trying to take projects off each other. I know I was trying to have a go at America's Cup, but yeah, really respect that it didn't end up like that. So I thank you, Councillor Simpson, for ensuring that we didn't make it go ugly, even though we're getting pressures from our local board to get this back on there, get this back on there. So really appreciate that we didn't have to do that, and we just looked at what was best for Auckland, what was best for us as a council. And I also want to acknowledge Patricia's leadership, her people-focused leadership, because this is not an easy time with staff cuts, and I've been through a redundancy. It's not a nice time, so I hope we can do it with some heart and consideration for our people. Thank you.
Kia ora, malo, thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I had to quickly rewrite what I wanted to say because I shared most of it yesterday and I didn't want to repeat myself. So I've got a few new things you'll be happy to know. I wanted to set the context for what drives me today and the consideration that's driven me throughout this discussion. And it goes back to the words and the that both written and spoken by renowned New Zealand economist Shamubeel Jacob, who says, tax is love. And so today I want to talk a little bit about love. At the outset of this process, one of the questions I asked the finance team was, we were talking, and Councillor Hills asked the question about debt. I asked a bit more about it yesterday in the workshop. And the answers we were given was one where I started to unravel whether we were serving ratepayers or ratings agencies. And some of you might remember that discussion when we were all on Skype. Today, I think it was John, the officer, who said, debt ceiling discussions isn't an art, isn't a science, it's an art. Cool, eh? So let me turn to the arts. And let me take this issue of money lending and see if we can understand it in the arts. In the play, Shakespeare's play, Councillor Coon, The Merchant of Venice, Shylock is a moneylender, and he's unhappy that he's had to give money to Antonio, not realising that he had to give it through Basinia. Let me read what he says, because they say, oh, he's not happy about this, our friend Shylock. And he says, as a result of you not being able to pay your money back to me, I want a pound of flesh. So why do you want his flesh? To bait fish withal. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, called my friends, heated mine enemies. And what is his reason? This is a man who lacks empathy and lacks compassion. But he goes on to say this, I am a Jew. And I want to park the idea that I know that there's been historical kind of English literature assessment over this around the race issue. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections and passions? Fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? I thought to reflect on Shakespeare's work because, for me, we love taxes in Manukau. There's a whole lot of love in Manukau. We pay, on top of our rates, a targeted rate. Manukau is full of love. We've taken on board, the words of Shamubeel Jacob. In the context of this budget, we've heard around coronavirus words like unprecedented, extraordinary, phenomenal times. And as we've watched overseas and the impact that this disease has had overseas, there is a disproportionate impact, negative impact, on vulnerable communities. There's something disastrous about how extreme conditions have such a disproportionate negative impact on the poor. And yet the poor in Manukau continue to pay taxes. They continue to pay targeted rates. They continue to express their love. And even in paying those extra taxes, we're going to be okay to a degree, I know Rochette is listening, with the deferment of the Otahu upgrade. Because that means a lot to a community that feels like they haven't been served in over 30 years. I'm glad that the living wage is staying. I'm glad that we're going to maintain our homelessness budget. And I'm glad that we've had a good look at the America's Cup, the very cup I voted against on my own just last year. Rates is love. And perhaps the people of Manukau are expressing in their desire and their willingness to pay extra rates that that's their expression of love. The final part of the quote perhaps represents our most vulnerable, because we're taking money from them too, and this is going to hurt. And I agree with how much I disagree with the coffee analogy. Our people hurt. Just like Shylock was saying in the end, the latter part of this soliloquy almost. They bleed and they feel the pain. And so I think that is what drives me to supporting the 3.5% today. I was sitting at a much lower level. No, I was a bit like you, Councillor Watson. But as we got the feedback, I heard from our communities, and more importantly, I heard also from our local boards who were staunch in saying you've got to get behind the 3.5. Last night I went to the book launch, Opening Little Boxes. When you open up that book, Councillor Casey, you absolutely rock, and you know that I have a bias towards liking you. The first page is like a kind of a summary page, and it says, home is where the heart is. And I think that's what council offers, is we offer the heart of the city, that we can offer a home that Chris Farrelly referred to yesterday, where people are sleeping, where the libraries are housing and homing some of our homeless. One of the things that I took to heart yesterday is I had planned, and you might not, this might not be nice to hear, Dr. Casey, but I had planned to just come, give you a hug, say I support you, have a photo because Josephine was going to post it, and then I was going to take off. But we all felt really challenged to stay. And when Dr. Fernando spoke, and when he started to reflect on what matters most to people at the end of their life, he said it was connection. It was connection. That's what we provide. That's what we are able to facilitate for our society, is these conditions so that people can connect. All of us had different experiences during lockdown. I was just heading back to work around council because you know that my wife had just given birth to Asalemo. She'd just been a month old. And one of the most beautiful things for me was being able to stay home and be an at-home dad. And the photos you didn't see, because I didn't post them publicly because I knew I would be criticised, was holding my baby girl and being on Skype, was being able to take the phone with me to the change table and change her nappies and feed her bottles. That's what lockdown was for me. But I acknowledge that it was even harder for many in Manukau who are going to be paying higher rates. We saw a spike in domestic violence in our area. And that's perhaps where some of the frustration and the pain that Councillor Filipino and I have been sharing. And so that's what my kind of thinking is today. I'm really grateful for the discussions. I want to talk again specifically to you, Councillor Simpson. I think you have led a collaborative, considered and constructive process. I have never seen this in the 4 years that I've been a councillor. And I want to give you every commendation for the way in which you've pulled people together, the way in which you've allowed people to have their say so that no one gets ridiculed. So we don't go out and backstab someone because we think, well, actually, they're not telling a whole truth. You've invited everyone to be all of who they are and bring all of their concerns and challenge the finance team to find out what we need to know. And I want to acknowledge you, Kevin. I know you and your team have worked long hours. Hey, but I want to say, Councillor Simpson, this is a process that you've led. That's what leadership looks like. And the time when our Prime Minister is saying, be kind and compassionate, that's what's driven this process. So well done, Councillor Simpson. I want to offer my thanks to the finance team, to Eddie Tuiavi'i, who was an absolute star in the webinars, to Kenneth Ayoropotea, Maruru atu lo awhionga, Kenneth. I don't know what your title name is, but you and the comms team have done an absolutely fantastic job. I still have my issues about whether we should use Zoom rather than Skype, but that's for another discussion. But well done to Kenneth and the team. And finally to our CSAs. They're absolutely amazing people. I've got the benefit of having Lolo and Kalila, who take my texts at really random hours, and yet they've been so generous with their time and all of their advice. This has been a great process. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the fact that we've been able to tackle and grapple and pull apart the issues so that we can land somewhere like this today. Well done, Councillor Simpson. I can't express my thanks and gratitude to you enough, and I hope that as we look forward, this is a little break before the next LTP challenge, but we can know that this has a serious impact on Aucklanders, but we're going to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malo. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to move an extension of time. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Right, thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Acknowledge.
Sorry, all those in favour for an extension of time? Aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
I feel like I'm Ewan Chatfield coming in just before the failure of light. And all the good runs have been scored ahead of me. And I acknowledge all the good words that have been spoken here today. It's been pretty impressive to hear, and as many of us have said, it has been a very collaborative, inclusive process over some pretty demanding months. I can't help but think the first thing I need to not acknowledge, other than that inclusive process, is the people that are affected. You know, when we're going through this budget over the many hours, tens, hundred of workshops, I always used to remind myself that behind every line that we're discussing are people. If they're not people within our organisation that are going to be hurting from redundancy or already having been disengaged, as 600 were very early on, it's all those that won't be engaged in the private sector because our capital program is markedly reduced. And that probably adds up to well over 2,000 people. But I can also say the hurt could have been a lot greater to people. And all of us came together to alleviate that hurt. We knew that those budget lines represented people within and without, and we've done the very best within the constraints to make it as palatable as possible, and it's only just. Look, a lot has been said about the various parts of this budget, so I'm probably not going to repeat that area, but I did sort of ask myself, you know, some months ago, I thought, wow, what sort of budget is this? And I was thinking of living in London in the early 80s and Thatcher. Mayor Phil, I would not describe it a Thatcher budget. That would be a real dishonest representation of your leadership on it. But it is probably it is the most brutal budget that I've ever had to preside over. Nothing comes near this in my time in local government. I hope that this is the last time I have to participate and make a vote on such a budget. I sort of probably arrived politely by labelling it more of a launchpad budget, like it's a new beginning budget, it's a reset budget. I don't use the word recovery, and I know a lot of people do, but I don't think we can afford to recover. That says that we're going back to sameness and familiarity, and I would like this budget, as painful as it is, to be the reset budget for Auckland. In coming months, we're going to start to get into the strategic response to COVID. We've been very embroiled and committed, and our staff are very good at this. The operational response to COVID has been just, you can't fault it within this organisation, and too with government, of course. Going forward, both government and ourselves, as the big city in New Zealand, are going to have to reframe the future together. And that's what I see this budget triggering. It's the launch towards that. Now, that strategic work is not yet visible, but the team are beavering away on it, and we'll see some of that come to the Planning Committee. We'll see it come through to Environment and Community Committee. We'll see it come through to the Finance and Performance Committee and the other committees, because it doesn't belong in any one place. It needs to pervade the whole organisation from now in. So how do we reset? We're going to have to change this organisation. So I'm going beyond the budget now, because this is what the budget enables. As long as we are willing to create the opening for this change, we're going to have to transform this organisation. If you look at the management structure of our organisation, and I know this is the responsibility of the Chief Executive, but I know Patricia is looking at this, it is very 20th century. Well, we're 2 decades almost into the 21st century. It's a very hierarchical, vertical, dislocated, tiered structure. That is not the structure that the modern day companies, and while we're not a company, there are management systems that actually face the future and are embracing the future that are way better than ours. And I would say we've got to have a look at that. I want to see us start to reward talent and sponsor innovation like never before. We really do need to step it up in that regard. And I know that in the lower echelons, in the lower tiers of this organisation, we've got a lot of young people that have come out of universities in the last year, 2, 3, 4 years, in the tiers there that are just burning to contribute. They feel a real strong sense of ownership and they want to contribute. I want to see their ideas permeate the organisation, be allowed to float to the top and be tested and not sealed off. I think there's just been a bit too much clay in this organisation, and I'll take responsibility for that as well. We need to just carve a bit of that clay away, if not the whole lot. So our organisation is going to have to reinvent itself over the next couple of months, 6 months, 12 months. And yes, there are constraints, but I remember an architect I engaged some time ago, and I gave him this project, and he says, wow, that's layered with a lot of constraints, and he got really excited. He says, give me those constraints, and then give me a really good, clear brief, and I'll deliver a great architectural outcome. And he did. And I think that's a reminder to me of the possible here. Constraints that we've never, ever envisaged. Let's us together write the brief for the future and deliver the architectural gem equivalent for Auckland. It is possible. I think council has got to stop being as insular as it has been. It's got to reach out to Aucklanders differently. It's got to tap into the private sector and lean on the private sector, invite the private sector to be a solver of our problems. And I've mentioned to the Mayor the establishment of something like a Futures Forum. And we've just had sort of early discussions on that. And it's not something that we then go and sit on. It's a forum that we brief to start thinking about the future of Auckland and look at the opportunities, look at the risks, and actually recommend back to us how we need to reset the policy settings in Auckland. We hand it over to them. We give them the invitation. We don't go and interfere with them, and we give them a lot of freedom. And I think something like that would be very, very beneficial. I think we need to be tapping into the universities way better as well. Tap into the PwCs and the EYs. I'm aware that some of these companies and more companies, they know that their customers are Aucklanders and they want to be part of building the new Auckland as well. So let's go there. Mayor, for you, I know you were very meaning the right thing when you contributed or signalled a reduction in your mayoral office budget. I discussed this with you on Monday, of some 2 million. The mayoral office budget is set by statute. It actually can't be reduced. It has to be what the statute says, which is 0.2% of the operational budget of the council, which is, I think, $6 million, 3 billion OPEX, Kevin, approximately. And the mayor, under statute, has a special responsibility. The way I read the statute, though, it's not just the mayor alone, it's the mayor working with the councillors. So it's not like the mayor has to promote promote the vision and articulate that vision. It's for him to seed the ideas and for us to embrace and test those and add to it. So that's what we're going to have to do. But it is a requirement under that legislation to establish and maintain an appropriate mayoral office. And I would say right now, we need to look at what's appropriate. Is it appropriate to reduce cost in the mayor's office, or to make sure that the output of the mayor's office is what fits the future? So just as we've formed up this budget collaboratively, I think going forward we need to be tapping into the mayor's office more fully resourced, and facing the future and working on ideas together. Strategic assets has been canvassed as well. I think, and a number of councillors said, maybe we need to go back and look at these things. You know, given the landscape changing so dramatically, we're probably going to have to re-examine what it does mean when we say strategic asset. Why is it strategic? It's just marked down in our council documents as being strategic, but I think we've lost sight of how do we arrive at defining it as strategic. And I am thinking the airport shares. We've never seen the airport shares as being a strategic investment when we had the difficulty of negotiating the light rail access to the airport. We never pulled that lever then. And most recently, we've got rolled entirely in the share placement plan. And I think we need to look at that. I think we need to look at the port as well, where I think there is an opportunity. The next step will be the critical step, though. And we're going to have to be doing that step with government more than ever. I think the days of getting spoon-fed by government with strings attached, pulling us up and backwards, they're not helpful. It's always difficult to reject, you know, a grant of some significance from the government. But I think the settings like FAR rates for the financial assistance rate for the rapid transit network and other parts of transport are probably more important to address. And I've spoken of the importance of government more fully funding the rapid transit network, which delivers national benefits, not just city benefits. Very similar to how the state highway network delivers state benefits, and that's why they pay for that to the tune of 100%. I've been thinking about unfolding that entrust, the vector entrust legislation, because eventually those benefits would come back to whatever the council entity is in the future. But I think that's probably just an enormous problem that is just not worth going near. But there are other things we're going to have to test and say to ourselves, well, even my sacred cow, I'm prepared to look at. It's not possible to renegotiate the CRL deal. I'd prefer to look at the RTN FAR rate, but we are going to have to look at those strategic assets. Going forward, there's an enormous opportunity that beckons in front of us. It's hard to see it at the moment, but in the next few months, if we use this budget as a launching pad budget, rather than see it as in the rearview mirror in months ahead as the austerity budget, I think there's brightness on the horizon. But if we don't take this opportunity, it is just going to be another budget that will fade into memory. It is going to be critical that we reset out of this budget, not recover.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Right, firstly, I'd like to thank the people of Auckland who submitted to the emergency budget consultation, and I want to thank all the staff who have worked tirelessly to provide us with all the information for us to make this decision today. I'd also like to thank you, Desley. I think you've done a wonderful job, and I think everyone around this table has only got good things to say about your leadership. Regardless of the outcome of the decision, it's been really refreshing to see the governing body, the local boards and the people of Auckland all coming together. This hasn't been a very easy decision for a lot of us, and for me, I've been tossing and turning and had a lot of sleepless nights on this. You know, we're all getting all these emails and telephone calls and people in the street coming up to us. I've always strongly advocated for pre-COVID-19 for the need to take a hard look at the expenditure in order to save costs. Prior to COVID-19, I was supportive of the zero increase. However, we're now in unprecedented, in extraordinary times, and I have to, where we have to reconsider our decisions for the benefit of the Auckland region. The public will be well aware that COVID-19, Auckland's forecast revenue is down. Rates revenue is only 40% of Auckland Council's total revenue, and 60% was from other investments from Ports of Auckland dividends and the Auckland airport dividends and venue hire, etc. So the revenue streams have been no longer been available to Auckland Council. So we also, it's unprecedented, we've had the unprecedented drought for Auckland facing with this situation, and the emergency budget was consulted. When the emergency budget was consulted, we were not told about the extra $224 million that would be needed to assist with the Auckland water infrastructure to reduce the risk of severe restriction in the coming months. Capital works have been deferred, staff numbers are going to be reduced, and all councillors and senior staff have had to have pay decrease. Everybody's had to play their part. A rates increase of less than 3.5 would require a level of reduction to council services, and that would have more detrimental effects on the community, including more job losses, less funding for essential water infrastructure, and reduction of opening hours for community facilities. I've had to consider what a rate of less than 3.5 would mean for also the super gold card users and other concession fares that will no longer be available. And I think some of this is information that hasn't really been out there, and I think people have been submitting on information that wasn't fully out there. So, and you have to excuse me with the glasses on because I had a bit of a fall, and I'll get to that later. I can understand some of these submissions that a lot of people want us to get back to the core business. And over COVID-19, a man in my community in Hauaki tripped over a very poorly patched up footpath and he died. And so we need to start spending more money on our core business. And just getting back to the glasses, so footpaths, I tripped 2 weeks before COVID-19 on a badly maintained footpaths, so that's where money needs to go. We need to also stop duplication, and I'm hoping that when we get our new CEO, and I'm not sure when that's going to happen, that we'll be all directing that person to reset the council's expenditures. And I acknowledge and I thank all of those that have submitted during this emergency consultation. There's been a vast majority of the submissions from Howard Ward area were for 0 and 2.5 rates rise due to the economic challenges of COVID-19. So this isn't an easy decision for me today. I acknowledge all the 21 local boards that supported the 3.5 rates increase, and many with the same knowledge from their community. The current mayor has promised a review of the council-controlled organisation, so I'm hoping that's going to happen after we get through all of this. And so I can only reaffirm my pledge to Howard community that I will continue strongly to advocate for the people that I serve for good governance. So I have decided to vote for, and I've been backwards and forth for this all day. Just excuse me a moment. I have decided 3.5.
Councillor, I can't thank you enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Kia ora mai tātou katoa. First, I want to thank the Mayor. You're a true leader, and you're renowned, and especially we really know now your work ethic, your common sense, your practicality, and I guess your willingness to just grab this and do what's needed to be done, and that takes courage. And Councillor Simpson, I would have to say, if there was a competition for the most glamorous and gracious finance chair, you would be number one in the world. Everything that's been said prior to this, I support all of it. Even people's right to vote what they want to vote. because I think that's what we have to do. You have to go with your gut, you have to go with the information you've got. But I've also been called lots of names by our Deputy Mayor, especially, alluding to where I come from, my age, and some sort of nocturnal mammal that flies at night and comes out of the Waitakere Ranges. But
Deputy Mayor,
wombats don't
wash your
fly.
mouth.
But I know that it's all in good humour, and Bill, we really know it's all terms of endearment from you in your blokey farmer way. And you've been an amazing support to the Mayor, and you've worked exceptionally hard. Shane, you've really stepped up in your job, and I know you were surprised and honoured to be given the job several months back in a different kind of world, but little did you know how big a step that would become. And I know that people say you're always smiling, but I know that it's been really hard for you and on you. And I've been really proud to be your fellow Waitakere councillor. It says, as the Deputy Mayor says, it doesn't matter which tie or scarf or jacket you wear. This is about our community. And I hope we put paid to the party politics that says that people that wear a different colour than some others don't care, because I've seen around this table everybody cares deeply. This is not a job for the faint-hearted. To the people of Auckland, and particularly at I'm going to say, not just my Westies, our Westies, our people from the Ranges, our people in Henderson, we have a really high Pacific and Māori population, second only to Manarewa. And so, we know how hard it is. Vision West, one of our really great community organisations, delivered 500 food parcels a day out west during COVID. Just imagine. I went on some of those deliveries, and my wonderful former colleague Penny Hulse did as well. I think you went along there, Shane. We know how hard it is. We've been to their houses. We see how difficult it is, even in the best of times. They have it tough. And our people in the ranges who are already really hurting that their ranges were closed, actually emotional, physical pain for them. And that was slow enough before, and now they're going to have to take those being slowed down. And it's been a really hard thing for us to have to support this, knowing that those tracks will not be open as fast as they would like. And also some of the reduction in our spend on Kāre dieback. So, we've heard our local board on that. We've heard both of our local boards. Glen Eden Town Centre put back again the plans for first done in 1989. Lincoln Road being put back, but maybe there's a little bit of hope there. All of those things, we really do get it, because we are those people, we live in that community. But at the same time, we had a responsibility to do the right thing. And I know that people get angry, and when people are grieving at the moment, and when part of the grief process is anger. And we're probably one of the only organisations that you can be consulted on. You can have your taxes put up, your power bill put up, your phone bill put up, food prices put up, all of that, and you can't do a thing about it. So we are the vehicle to get everybody's venom, and I understand that. I absolutely understand that. But at the same time, when you're angry, it's hard to take on information. And especially when you're fed incorrect information. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And some of the facts, I'll do inverted commas, that have been coming out, are pretty disgusting. They really cast aspersions, all sorts of nonsense. And it's driving people to say the most hideous things. But I can forgive all that, because when people are hurting, they lash out. And we just have to take it on the chin and keep doing the right thing. That's what leadership is. So, I know with my own brother, who's 59, he'll be 60 this year. He's been an apprentice since he was 18. He did his apprenticeship at government print, now that's all gone too. So he's been a printer all his life, and during COVID there was no work at all. And when there was work, they couldn't get the paper because it wasn't coming into the country. And my mum, my good old mum, who's a widow and is 81, helped him pay the mortgage for a couple of months. You know, my brother is gutted. His wife's work of refitting hotels was gone too. I've been very lucky in other regards that other family members have been okay. So I know what it's like. And during COVID, you know, I was out walking or cycling most days, and what I saw was people coming out in droves that normally wouldn't, because really the only council facilities that were available were our footpaths, our roads, and our parks, and you couldn't go on the playgrounds anyway. So we had a bit of that emergency tape, and all my locals are going, "Can you please put a tape on it?" So my husband and I went round with the emergency tape and put it all over the things, and I gave some to Penny House, and she did one of her equipment next to her park as well. But I think the thing is, what it showed me was that those are our basic services. If we went to 2.5 or 0, as some people wanted, even those footpaths would be broken, the roads would be potholed, our parks would be in a mess. You know, as it was, the libraries being closed, my mother said to me, that is the worst thing in lockdown for her. Absolutely the worst thing. And so, for me, I don't want to impact on those basic services any more than we have to. No matter how scared or angry people are, because they still, until they see that rates bill and they go, "Oh, it's about $25 a quarter. Oh, it's not so bad. I think I can manage it." And if they can't manage it, we've put something in place to help them. And I urge people, don't be proud. No one has to know about it. You know, you can get help. But I think if we were populist and just swayed by what our consultation said, because as we know, that's not a referendum. It gives us a good guide to how people are feeling, but it also pinpoints the things that are really important to people. And I think we've preserved the things that are really important to here. That's what's so important to me, is none of us came in here to cut things. We didn't. I mean, some of you might, you know, the old throwaway, you know, cut the VAT, etc., etc. But we know that for a long time we've been pretty close. We've been into the muscle. We've been making massive multi-million-dollar savings every year for nearly a decade now. So we can't go too much further. I want to acknowledge my fellow councillors and local boards, and you know, some of you, I get frustrated with local boards. However, because it's still an evolving relationship, however, they're doing their job, and we've worked really well together over this. So I think that's been fantastic. What I want to say about, I know my councillors, I'm sure the local board, all through this, all of you, all of us have kept doing our constituency work. The stuff we normally have to do anyway, answering people, finding information out, doing all that, because things had to go on, and we've all been doing that. And I acknowledge you for that, because that's what we're there for. But this is where I really fully acknowledge our staff. Unfairly maligned, often. Contrary to popular opinion, they've stood behind us doing the work both to get this budget together, but to all the workers, all our staff who've kept things going, the building consents, the animal management, the resource consents, just everything that keeps Auckland going. These people are unsung heroes. They're decent, hard-working, clever and caring people who do everything to serve. And I mihi to you all, arahanui and kia kaha in these coming times. It's not going to be easy. In closing, this budget will set very soon, we all hope very soon, we'll set it, will not be an outlier in New Zealand. It is not unexpected. What it does is secure our present services, our construction projects, in a way that keeps costs as low as we possibly can, while providing a solid platform for the future. And I support the recommendation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher, are you there?
And my fellow...
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm here. thank you. That there's an echo there. Is that? Yeah, thank you. Well, this has been a really interesting journey that we've all been on since we got together. Gosh, how many months ago was it, to try and decide whether it was going to be a V shape or a U shape in terms of recovery, how long this would all last for, what we should do by way of consultation. And I think in all of the speeches that I've heard today, I have identified with something. It's probably quite a well-known fact that I didn't support Phil Goff, but I do want to echo those who have supported Desley, Councillor Simpson, as the chair of the Finance Committee, and I think she has done a really interesting job. For those of you that don't know, Desley comes with a musical background. In fact, her mother is a wonderful choir mistress and conductor, and I think what you've seen in the creative side of Desley coming through, the musician, the conductor, is sort of bringing everybody out at the right time and weaving it together to create some beautiful sounds. And while I've reflected on what you've all had to say, I was thinking with Efeso, where he was talking of the merchant in Venice and then on to tax's love. Well, the school that I went to, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, by love serve. So I would hate to think that we're serving rates, but they certainly play their part. But I wondered whether or not this was what Rodney Hyde intended about bringing the region together. I rather suspect it wasn't, but I certainly think that there were members of the Royal Commission who could see a glorious future where Aucklanders could come together and find a way in which we could weave the city together. And it's been really, it's been very heartwarming listening to the human stories and also reflecting on what you all did during lockdown. In my own case, as I thought of Efeso with a new baby in the family, I'd had surgery, I nursed my husband, thank God for Skype. During Skype meetings, I welcomed hospices, I welcomed ambulances, people came and went, and what will never be known is I actually was on Skype as I lay beside my husband as he eventually passed away with pneumonia. So we've all been on this fascinating journey, and I think what has been really, really good is that we have had to focus and to really prioritise on what is important to us. I have had to be part of difficult budgets in the past. In 1991, I was involved in the mother of all budgets, and as Mayor of Legacy Auckland City, when I realised that we were not meeting our contribution on capital depreciation, I put the rates up by 10%. And that had a profound effect on me in terms of later hearing the plight of people whose lives I'd hurt by that decision. And so whatever I do now, I ask myself some questions, and I've asked certainly with this budget some questions, because I think I needed to know for myself, in terms of crisis management, have we been careful to represent all of our communities and not abuse the monopoly powers that we have as a council? So it's been good to hear the responses on those that are vulnerable today, but I'd also like to think about those who are frightened, and I think there are a lot of frightened people out there who on paper may be asset rich, but in reality are cash poor and on diminishing incomes, and in many cases now grappling with the fear of unemployment. The second question I've asked myself is with regards recovery. Will our budget spend help or hinder? Are we putting the right amount into the projects that are going to generate employment? Are we giving the right incentives to those who can assist in terms of small businesses and creating jobs? Are we giving the right assistance to the ratepayer? Where is, and I know that Chris Darby's already touched on this, but where is the new thinking and innovations? What are the lessons that we've taken from COVID is it just business as usual? Have we actually matured and found new ways of doing things? The next question I've been putting myself through is, have we just parked the hard issues? So will this budget, because it's just one step in the journey that we're on, it's not, this isn't the magical story that I read to my grandchildren where there's a happy ever after. This is just a landing. This is just an end point for today before we start on the LTP. And the decisions that we take today, will they complement and will they inform the LTP and provide the basis for a fundamental reset? And finally, the 3.3 has been controversial, and if we adopt it today, does it actually fix the problems? I think not. I think where I've landed is with Councillor Watts, and I would have liked to have actually seen the council come together unanimously today. We managed to pull that off with a lot of work and a lot of conducting of orchestras with the CRL. That was adopted unanimously, and I would like to have been able to give Desley that today. But where I've arrived at is, as Councillor Watson has, that I think that 2.5 is the place that we should land. It's been unfortunate. Obviously, we've all received a lot of correspondence both ways. I think it is unfortunate at the beginning that we didn't allow for some options that might have included a zero or, a smaller increase. Not because I think it would have been adopted, quite the reverse. I think, as Wayne Walker reflected earlier, it would have given people choice, and with that choice there would have been a sense of ownership. But unfortunately, by failing to do that, it gave the appearance of predetermination, maybe business as usual, and to some it created the perception of self-preservation. So I think that was a difficult place to start with the consultation. But I will be the first to defend the cuts that we have made. I will be the first to step in and correct those who think that we are making no attempt. But by the same token, I can't bring myself to go to 3.5%. So I would like to support 2.5%. But in concluding, I would like to say that our relationship with central government is really complex. I've been a bit disappointed that we have bagged water care, at times I think unfairly. Central government, whether it's of the left or the right, has not necessarily understood Auckland. I haven't liked the way that we have abrogated on decision making. Those who've known me for a long time will know that by allowing central government to take over the decision over light rail along Dominion Road, I think it's been a disaster, and it will take a long, long time before we finally get decisions that will be taken there. But whatever comes out of the CCO review, we have to be more vigilant with central government. We have to be more determined. We do have to demand those legislative changes that we require in order that we can have functionality. But the budget as it stands has many good dimensions to it. We've got lots of opportunities coming before us. I was grateful that the Mayor has, in releasing the funds, which were initially associated with the World War I Memorial, that are now, along with working with the museum and the RSA and the support of Auckland Council, the refurbishment of the Court of Honour, that we can still continue with that project and that we will see the conservation management plan through. In terms of health and safety, we really must achieve that. but it is a nationally significant project, and I want to thank those who are giving their time voluntarily to advancing that project, and look forward to bringing it back to you with the support of other communities from around New Zealand. But congratulations again to all of those who have supported us during this difficult time. I would particularly like to thank Democracy Services. It wasn't much fun to have had an accident immediately after having been away for a while, as we all were, with lockdown. It's been quite a lonely time in my life, and of all the times that I would actually like to be back in the office, it is actually now, and so it's been frustrating to me that because of an accident I'm not able to be there for any length of time. But I would particularly like to thank the Democracy Services staff, Sandra and Sonia and Melissa Bidouar, who have enabled me to be part of the debate here today, and meaning that I haven't actually missed anything as we worked our way through this. This is just one step on the journey. I'm looking forward to the LTP debate. And what I do think we've done, and we should all take great pride in, this has been a crisis, but we have turned it into, I think, a force for good, insofar as that we are more open-minded. We can see the opportunities that we've got with the LTP coming up, and I just want to thank all of my fellow councillors and the members of the IMSB for the opportunity, for hearing from the bottom of their hearts the things that make us human and vulnerable, that we see translated to council, because as it has been said several times already today, it is our home, it is our Turanga Waiwai, it is the place that we look at as council when things are difficult. We all need a sense of belonging, and I think council has provided that during this difficult time, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I think that concludes the debate around the table. Hold on, just a sec. Do I talk first? I don't talk much. You do all the talking. Look, I just want to cast you back. Team Auckland, gosh, wasn't that a good term? I want to cast you back to November last year. It just sort of seems miles away now, doesn't it? When we were starting the annual budget. You know, we were in, thank goodness, thank you, Kevin and your team, a really good financial position. Our second quarter had us 7% above budget for revenue. You know, in simple terms, we had more money coming in the door than we budgeted for. Great place to be. Then we had Christmas, and then we had the third quarter, which is when we began to see the impacts of COVID. But even then, even at the end of the third quarter, we were still bringing in 4% ahead of our budget for income. So I think we can all look around this table and say, we started in a really good place, and thank goodness for that. But then, of course, came COVID, and it hit us like I never thought it would hit us, because I kind of thought at first of COVID, it's a health issue, you know? It's all about having a serious health issue. But then I began to see the financial impact, and I'll tell you, it frightened the bejesus out of me. Because when I learnt that we had over $500 million less money coming in the door, I couldn't for the life of me think how we were going to deliver all the things we were going to deliver. And by this time, we're in lockdown, all right? So I'm sitting in my home downstairs, talking to the mayoral office and the mayor and finance team and whatever, and I thought, COVID's hit, it's a health crisis, there are terrible things happening financially, we have to go zero. There is no way we can put rates up. You know, people are hurting, this is going to be a really bad time, I want to go zero. But as it became explained to me financially, I realised we couldn't do that. And that was a bit scary, actually, because I think if you've seen all the billions of emails that you've got in the door, and if you don't really understand what we're talking about here, you would think the same, and we know a lot of people do. So I realised you lose 60% of your income and you're left with 40% less, and of those 40%, you may not get 40% being able to pay rates, it might be 30%, might be 28%, might be 26%, and you were left with a very little bit of money to run a lot. So then we looked at how we were going to consult on an emergency budget, and it was an emergency. We were in a crisis, a COVID crisis, and we'd lost all this money, and we had to put together a budget that worked. So we end up, all of us, realising that zero wouldn't work. Not one councillor put up zero rates rise as an option, not one. There was that first vote, we were all, was it two, we're not about 2.5. There was a few of you that didn't stick with the 2.5 and 3.5 and wanted it lower. But when we actually ended up on the consultation document, that was unanimous, that we went out to the people of Auckland with 3.5 and down to 2.5. And look, Your Worship, I wanted to go as low as you could. I pulled you down. Didn't want to do 3.5. Wanted to go down to 2.5. Then the results came in. We put together a longer summary document than we've ever had before, trying to explain how bad it was. And off we went. And in came the results. And look, you can look at these results, lies, damned lies, statistics and consultation results. In came the results, and the one that I think I took on the most was the Colmar-Brunton. Because I knew that with the Colmar-Brunton result, that people had been given the right questions and the right information before they made a call. Because I'm still convinced that some people who have the results that have come in, that they haven't really understood. And of course that came up as 2.5. I went, great, that's it, we're going to do 2.5. Said to the Mayor, doing 2.5. I'm not doing your 3.5, I want to do 2.5. And then we had the drought. And just when I thought it was kind of going to work at 2.5, we had the drought. And we went from $500 million to $750 million as a financial problem to deal with. And, the analogy I use that, when you're not very well and you go into a hospital, you end up in the emergency room, right? And we kind of left the emergency room and went into intensive care there for a bit, didn't we? So we had to calibrate, in my words, we had to calibrate again for about like the 33rd time we had to go at this budget to look after our water crisis. It's certainly not a budget that is business as usual. There is nothing BAU about this budget. Nothing. All right? We will definitely be a leaner council as a result. Definitely. We have found we've done our bit, haven't we? $200 million worth of savings. Now, let me just give you an idea of what that is. The savings that we were going to make this year was $17 million. The council before I turned up, the last LTP, the savings target for this year was $7 million. So we're 12 times that. We have never saved so much money in 1 year, ever. It's big. We have deferred millions, and we have a very large asset recycling / sale program to deal with to bring cash in the door. We've also cut staff. And I want to make it very clear, some of you have said things today, and I just want to temper what you've said. We are not sending letters out to staff this week, and they're not going to have face-to-face interviews. There is a process around that, of which our acting chief executive will handle. And you've just got to appreciate there are staff in the room listening today, and they know, we know, so a lot of this, sometimes more than them, all right? So just be very careful what you say around that. Media, please be very careful what you say about that. I want to say thanks to you all. I know it's hard. If anyone's felt it, it's me, I tell you. But we have to do the right thing to get this city in a place that we can keep it moving. Because a lot of you have said we've got infrastructure problems out the wazoo, as they say, and we have to continue to do that. So I want to say a few thank yous. My first thank you will go to our CCOs. When we first asked them to redo their budgets, they came back and we politely asked them to have another go, didn't we? They have lost millions. Millions. In some cases, hundreds of millions from their budget. They have been part of our solution. I want to thank local boards. Yes, every single local board voted for 3.5. And yes, there were conditions, and some of them I think were political. Come on, I've been in local board land too. But they realised that actually the answer to actually get stuff done was the 3.5%. And I particularly want to thank the local board chairs who have put hours and hours and hours into Skype calls and been here to participate. It has been Team Auckland, and we've all had a chance to have a say. To my colleagues, He Waka Aka Noa, we have all been in this together, haven't we? I know this has been tough, but you have shown resilience and strength at a time of crisis, and I am grateful, all of you, I am grateful so much for the support you've given me during this process. You've asked truckloads of questions, and I know we haven't heard them today, but we have had, what did we add up? Something like 500 and something questions that have come through that we have dealt with. And it's good. I'm really pleased you've asked the questions, because you're not sitting here today without knowing the answers. And I feel that's good, because I actually still think Auckland don't know some of the answers. So I'm going to say, you've got to give me a bit of licence here. I'm going to say my thank yous to you. I'm going to start with the Mayor. Your Worship, thank you very much. We've had some interesting discussions, and as I said, you know, I wasn't a fan of 3.5. I was a definite fan of 2.5. I've given you a real hard time about the government. There for the grace. Yeah, and I must admit, it was close. They didn't respond on the day, but they came to the party with 296 million, and I appreciate that. I'm not sure how much of the first 98 million we're actually going to have, but it's appreciative, and I think you know, it's coming from me, and I'm saying thank you. So please pass that on. I also want to thank you for Neil. If you can't drop your budget, I want Neil, please, because the guy's a genius. He is quiet, he's responsive, he's been really sick. It's stressful. A lot of people have been really stressful through this time, and you've been sick, Neil. And I want to thank you for the support. Is there anything, Desley, is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything I can do? He's fantastic, so thank you. Bill, I want to thank you. Yes, you do support the Mayor really, really well. And I want to particularly thank you for the work that you've taken some of the councillors aside and helped them understand. You do understand the finances, and I appreciate that. You've also done the webinars, and that's been a lot of work on top of what we've all been doing, and I really, really appreciate what you have done. And Christine, thank you. Tracy, big call. I know that you're doing what you have to do as opposed to what you want to do. You've been there for me, and I know economic development's really important to you, and this budget will deal to that. So thank you for your personal support, and thank you what you've done. Papa, I want to thank you, because your input really has been around that consultation feedback, and I think as a result of the way that you've spoken around that, we will get some changes in the future, and I really want to appreciate that. I also want to appreciate the fact that a lot of the big submissions came into Pippa's ward. Do you remember EMA supported 3.5%? So you've got a lot of that. You've got the, what's the union called? First Union? You've got the unions in your ward? So you've taken a lot of that regional flavour on board. Kathy, thank you. You're so passionate, you know. Thank you for talking to me when the water care people were in the room as opposed to them. Thank you for animal shelters, and thank you for libraries. I thought LDI would be, that's how I deal with, but we've actually done a better deal than that. So thank you. Alf, you do a lot behind the scenes. You're often not thanked for the work that you do behind the scenes, but I know what you do because people tell me. You keep your light under a bushel, but you're a big strength to especially your colleagues in the South. So thank you for that, Alf. Joe, you're great. You're happy, and that's really super. And you've come to the table happy, and you've made a huge contribution. I know America's Cup is important to you, and we've accommodated that. Not America's Cup is important. I know the budget around the America's Cup has been important to you. Thank you for your support. We share a board, and I've been really appreciative about the questions you've asked. You asked them simply and everyone can understand, so thank you. Wayne, now I've just got a couple of questions. And what we need is an Excel spreadsheet. The real thing I want to thank you for, Wayne, is the way that you have ensured that we have room to breathe. Because I don't think we're out of this, not straight away. I think it's going to be quite hard. And you've allowed, you brought to the table the fact that we need a little fat in the system. Chris, you know more about debt and treasury now than I bet you knew a month ago. It's been a good learning, and I learned too, thank you. So thank you for bringing those people together. But also in your public transport and road safety campaign. We've included that, and I think that's a big contribution you've made, thank you. Linda. Linda, you tell it as it is, don't you, really? And you always ask the right questions. Regulatory, this is going to be a hit for regulatory, and I know that, and you've taken it on the chin, and you do a great job chairing that, but you have been great to the table. You can cover, you are able to understand right across the board. It's fantastic. You're a good contributor. I really appreciate that. Angela, champion of local boards, eh? Thank you for helping to clarify the understanding for councillors who've never been in local board land exactly what this budget means for local boards and the communities that they interact with and the way they interact with them. You've been a great support for me too, thank you. And I think where we've landed with that local board stuff is really good. Paul, you're a great listener. You're always here. If I ask you a question, you got the answer. You've asked the right questions. Thank you. And thank you for your support. You're a good contributor. John, I want to thank you. And particularly, I want to thank you for the change around the process for asset sales. You're my doubting Thomas. And actually, that's good because it makes me make sure that we do the right thing. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the effort that you put in behind that. Greg, you write a mean email when you cross, but I want to say that you do advocate very strongly for Rodney, and I know that the road sealing is a real passionate thing for you, and I'm sorry we couldn't do it, but we can't do everything, but I know that was really important to you, and I thank you for your advocacy around that. Sharon, thank you. You're great. And the thing I want to say to you is, as a grandmother to you, I called you in here in the school holidays when we were supposed to have a week off. Do you remember? We were supposed to have a week away from meetings and you'd made the commitment. And I said, Sharon, I really need you. And you came. And that means a lot to me, Sharon. Thank you. I feel so. Same to you. Actually, COVID was quite good to you, eh? You had a month off for the maternity leave, and then you sort of spread and spread and spread and spread. I want to thank you. You talk to me all hours of the day and night. I won't tell everybody how you do that, but I really appreciate that. And you always put some humour in, and you always care. You're asking me how I am, and that's really nice. So thank you. And I appreciate that you came in too in the holiday time, which was really good. Richard. Your thing has been around people's mental well-being, and I know that staff cuts have hurt you as a person, and I really appreciate the way that you have been able to have that caring approach. It's been really important, There's lots of things that are in this budget that are important to you as well. But I think that's the bit I've really noticed, that you're caring for people, you're concerned about people, and that makes you a good person. Thank you. Shane, couldn't want for a better deputy. When the Mayor gave me this, I've just got to be very careful. If I could ask the media not to report these words, please. When the Mayor gave me a raging pinko as my deputy, I sort of thought, oh my goodness, how's that going to work? But you have been great. You know, there's no politics in this game for us, you and I. You've been there every step of the way. I've seen you scared. I've seen you very frightened. Thank you for your trust in me. I said it would be okay. I'm not sure that okay is the word, but you have been fantastic. You've been with me every step of the way. When I've asked you to do something, you've done it. And I will say what I can say. I will say in public what I have said yesterday. When I needed you to talk to some local boards because I didn't think they understood, you did it. And you pretty much drove from the North Shore to South Auckland in one day to do that. So I really, really appreciate that. Councillor Fletcher, I hope you're still listening. I just want to say this has been an incredibly tough time for you as well. It's been a tough time for us, and we haven't had to live through the sorts of things that you've had to. So thank you for coming on board, even though all the things that have happened in your life have happened during this time. We really appreciate it. Daniel, you're hugely intelligent. You're brave. You don't mind calling anybody out. And this budget doesn't do all the things that you want it to do, but you know it's as good as we can get. I really appreciate your support, and I know for your community this will be tough, and I thank you. Ren, I don't live in the backyard of Ngāti Whātua without having an appreciation of Māori and the importance of Māori outcomes. So thank you for your contribution, and we have that as a very key principle behind this budget. David, thank you for supporting the Mayor when he went down to the Waikato. I'm not sure that I was really that keen when you came back with such a big price tag, but you've...
better than $20 million a day.
Better than $20 million a day. But I want to say thank you for your support of the Mayor around the water crisis and your support around this table. It means a lot. To the three supporters I have beside me, and I call them supporters because there's Sonia, Sandra, and Sandra. Look, you sat here patiently as we have talked, and you've supported me. Thank you for the coffee and the water and the are you all right and that awful smelly stuff that's called focus when I, have my moment. I really appreciate the work that all you people have done and are doing. And I really appreciate the fact that finance are usually screaming at the lights hour because they haven't done their PowerPoint presentation because we've just changed it half an hour before the meeting and you're trying to load it and everyone's asking, where's my stuff? What am I supposed to be looking at? And you'll go, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So thank you very much. I want to say to the people behind me, our support team, all of you, thank you. Behind every good councillor is a team of others. I particularly want to thank Tam. She is a manager of the CSAs, and I have stolen her, for want of a better word, to look after me, and she's had a really tough time. Tam, thank you for the weekends, for the nights, everything, when your daughter has to go off to medical appointments and all sorts of things. Thank you for all that. I really appreciate it. You've been fantastic. Thank you to our acting CEO. Is she still here? Well, you can tell. Mr. Raisika. Well, tell her I said thank you. She's going to have a big job to do now because we've given her a big challenge. And last but not least, thank you to the legal and engagement team. The legal, I've called on you more than once. An engagement team, I think, have been fantastic in a very quick time. Remember, they've engaged twice. We did it once and then we did it again. And finally, to my finance team, you're only acting. You're not even, poor you. What a job. What a job. You've done, I don't know how many versions of this budget. You've worked all over Easter. You've worked till midnight, night after night. And you have given us sound professional advice. Now, you don't get to my age without knowing a few people. So I've actually taken some of your advice and gone to others and said, listen, what if, hypothetically, what would this look like? And I have challenged, and they have said, you're right. So I know that you're good at what you do. So to you, to Ross, Anita, Ross Tombside, Andrew and Aaron, Pramod, Michael, Nick, Nicola, Kylie, Marin, John Bishop, I will never forget you in debt, ever. I want to say a huge thank you, and ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and thank our finance team. Right, now I just want to explain what you're about to vote on. It is a package. If you are voting, and I respect everyone's vote, and I think what we've always had around this table is respect for different opinions, right? If you are voting for 2.5%, you are not giving the local boards back their budget. You are giving them 20% less. You are not keeping libraries open. You are not putting up the UAGC by 3.5%, you're putting it up by 2.5%. You are taking away the gold card from seniors, and you're charging more for peak public transport services. You know this, we've talked about it. Those are just examples, there are more, but this is a package. You cannot lower one lot of income without doing something else somewhere. So I respect that people have a view, and I just want to remind you that the vote is that accordingly. It is a package. Today is a bit of a dark day because it's a hard budget, isn't it? And I thank you for your support. You've led us to a good place. Well, I'm just waiting for the hate mail that I've led a group of councillors through a process that's put up rates by 3.5%. Look, I didn't get my way in everything. I didn't like the extra targeted rates for Manukau City Council and Auckland City Council. I didn't like that. Didn't want to vote for that. Didn't vote for that. But it is as good as I think we can do to confidently get us out of our financial hole. It will be monitored not quarterly, weekly, monthly, and it's got enough elasticity in it that as we monitor our way through the year, we have a bit of flexibility. So it's a budget which doesn't cripple our future, but assists us to rebuild. Hei aha te mea nui te ho, hei tangata, hei tangata, hei tangata. And that's what it's for. Ladies and gentlemen, I have seconded this budget, and I'll now call on to the Mayor for his right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is going to be incredibly brief. I just noticed Tim Murphy on Newsroom saying if he hears another councillor thank another councillor, he's going to go mad. Just email them. Some sympathy for you there, Tim. Look, very briefly, this has been a tough budget. Always was going to be when you suddenly lose $500 million in income, then find you've got to spend another $250 million on infrastructure you weren't expecting to build. What was important about this process was, one, the process was right. It was collaborative, it was informative. We were led to take evidence-driven decisions. That's what decisions should be about. There's a responsibility of leadership, and we're all leaders around this table. And that responsibility is to take decisions that you know to be right, whether or not they are the easy decisions to take. And I believe that we will take the decisions today that are right. And I want to thank everyone around the table. Look, I should do this after the vote. Let's take the vote first, and then I've just got a very small ceremony to perform after that. I could do it in the governing body. I'll do that in the governing body.
So I just want to remind you, you're either voting for this budget or you're not. You can't take a bit out. You can't take one bit out. It all goes together. All right? All right? So
You can.
you can note the bit that you don't like, but remember it is a package. So should I put it to the voices? No? No, sorry, a division has been called. All right? Ladies, a division has been called.
Thank you, Chair Simpson. You're voting for the motion on the screen. Please say yes or no for when I call your name. Mayor Goff.
Aye.
Councillor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Bartley.
For.
IMSB member Blair.
Aye.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
4.
Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
Aye.
Councillor Dalton.
Aye.
Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Filipina.
5.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes.
Councillor Hills.
Aye, thank you.
Councillor Mulholland.
4.
Councillor Newman. Councillor Sayers. Councillor Stewart. Chair Taipari. Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
No.
Councillor Young.
Yes.
Chair Simpson. 4. Thank you. 20 to 3. Carried.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now that brings me to the end of the Finance and Performance Committee, and we'll have a 2-minute break while we start the governing body. Thank you.